Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another afternoon edition of the Home Theater Hangout. And we're back again with Matthew Poes of Poes Acoustics. We are now into part two of our home theater builder tips. Today, we're going to be discussing how to build a riser, some tips on that, and also some flooring options. Because, as you know, I'm building out my home theater, and in my room, I have a concrete floor. So, I would assume that we tackle flooring first before we get to riser, unless you have some thoughts.
I mean, when you're building the room, obviously those are all going to go together around the same time. But yeah, I mean, if you can decouple the floor overall, it reduces any need to do additional decoupling on the riser. So let's just start with the floor because there's a lot that goes into that, and then we can get into the riser and the overall details.
All right.
So
So yeah, did you see the video I posted yesterday?
I
Gives
don't
you a
watch.
little well, here's a little quick little glimpse of what the actual room looks like, because I know you don't know what it looks like. So this is like a converted family room. Let me just mute my mic here. Wide. So it's 14 wide, 10 high, and then 24 deep, and then below that carpet is just concrete. Let me just blow that up for you. Boom.
Are we keeping the color scheme?
Yeah, we're going for the Barbie color scheme. And then obviously I'm gonna like drywall over the windows, and there's a sliding door back there as well, so that's gonna be sealed off. And then do I walk around? I'm pretty sure I walk around here somewhere. Yeah, so this is the front of the room. There's a door right behind me. That's a window there. That's my Justice League poster. So that's gonna be sealed off. That's gonna be sealed off. But we're talking about the floor here. The floor is concrete, but this is what the room looks like right now.
So the issue that we would run into, as would be the case with any kind of room like this, would be if we didn't touch that floor, you just put carpet on it. And that's what most people do.
Yeah,
You're going to have basically no tactile base.
yeah.
And I've taught, I did my own video on this. If you guys haven't watched it, check out the video I did on tactile base and you can see where I discuss this issue. But think of it this way. Tactile base is about inertia. It takes a certain amount of energy to shake something. Pretty obvious, right? And subwoofers are producing that energy. At the end of the day, even our biggest subwoofers aren't really that big for being able to shake the whole earth. When you have a concrete foundation in the ground with footers, because it's got to support the house, you can't shake that because it's going to be all of the mass of the foundation plus about maybe 10% or so of the area around it of ground that it has to shake. Not going to happen. So what we want to do, because Shane, you want some tactile base, I'm sure,
Yep.
is we want to try to make what you sit on resilient basically to the concrete, meaning that it's sitting on it with something that allows it to shake, some sort of a spring. And spring doesn't have to mean a literal steel spring. It can be rubber, it can be silicone, there's a lot of options. So the cheapest solution typically is just a rubber pad. It's usually like a recycled rubber mat. A lot of people try to get fancy and they try to go find like recycled rubber mats that are used for gym floors instead of the UL rated products designed for this to save money. And I'm just going to tell you, you're probably not saving money. The product that's designed for acoustics isn't particularly expensive. So I recommend that you buy the products that are made specifically for that. And then you put plywood typically or oriented strand board or something like that, some sort of subfloor on top of it. You can even do a couple layers if you need to do some sort of something to help reduce sound transfer. A couple of layers, even with green glue, could be good. Otherwise, just doing the one layer of 3/4 inch tongue and groove subfloor is fine. You put that over the rubber and you put your flooring on top of it. Doing that provides some resilience. It's a good idea. The next step up from that, but I'm guessing, Shane, you're going to tell me this is off the table. But
Go
to get
ahead.
away with it, it would be better is you actually use something that has, like, they're called sleepers. And
Yep.
you could do like hush frame. You can use the hush frame decoupler. They make a version of it that's a little thinner. You can use rubber sleepers. You can use any sort of rubber blocks. There's a Pack International is a company I work with quite a bit. They use these rubber blocks from a German company. And then you put insulation between the rubber blocks. You lay them out in a grid, let's say 16 by 16 or 24 by 24, something like that. You put insulation between the rows of blocks. You put your plywood or subfloor or whatever on top of that. That's better because there's more spring, basically. Because there's more spring, there's more area to shake. And so that'll work even better yet, but it's more work and more cost. And instead of losing like 1/4 inch of height or maybe an inch of height, you're losing a couple of inches because of the height of the blocks.
So let's explain what tactile base is. So basically, if it's sitting on a concrete floor, when your explosions hit, you're not going to get that vibration through the ground up to your seats. You're not going to really feel it. But adding a subfloor with the plywood, you're going to get those vibrations that travel up to your body. So you get that real tactile sensation. So this is what we're talking about here today. And during my homework, I ran across a couple of videos where they were using this. It's like a roll of plastic almost to keep like moisture, so it goes below the little grooves here, and then you
It's
put the
called dimple
plywood on
mat.
top of that. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, as long as you also add some rubber, that could be a good idea. It doesn't have the resilience of rubber. That is a plastic mat, and it's designed specifically to allow airflow and moisture to be able to go through. So it's not a bad idea to use that. I would still
yeah,
throw a layer of the resilient rubber material on top of that.
okay,
Um, and the reason to use that has more to do with, and you would have to talk to somebody in your area. I don't know your area well enough to know this, but sometimes with concrete, you can't put flooring right on top of it because moisture will wick through the concrete, or there will be situations where some water could get there. And having that mat in there, like in basements, this is really common. Having
yeah.
that mat in there allows, if that room has carpet straight onto the concrete and it's above grade, it may not actually need that. And it's not going to add a lot for the tactile base part because, like I said, it's not resilient. They do make dimple rubber mat, and you can use that.
They have, maybe is this what we're talking about here? Let me see. Let me bring it up.
If you go to ISO store, they sell the product.
Does that look like anything interesting? Rubber
I
trim
wouldn't.
floor mat? No.
So this is what I was saying not to do. I wouldn't do this because that wasn't designed to go between wood on a floor. There could be
Okay.
issues with that. So go to ISO store if you want to show people something.
Okay. Let's see. So store.
So here you're going to go to products. I can't see what you're looking at anymore. Can you make the full?
We have resilient sound clips, green glue, acoustical sealant, total mass barrier, genie mat.
It's a Genie Mat product. So let's go
Okay.
ahead and look at that.
There we go.
Yep. See the one in the middle there that's got some dimples showing through?
Yeah.
So the one to the left is the one I was going to recommend to you, but this works too. This has dimples. If you use the thickest one with the dimples and you lay it down the way they tell you to, that actually works quite well.
This guy here, the big one.
Yeah,
What is
the
it?
big one's
FF25.
Mhm.
So would
Thicker,
you
so you could go to FF17 too if you can't get away with the thickness. Below that, I would just use the other mat.
what does the FF stand for? What does that mean?
The thickness of the mat.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay. So this is guys, this is at ISO. What is it called? ISO store?
ISO store, yeah.
ISO store.
And the guy that runs that's become a friend. I used him for a lot of products. I think this was made by Plytech. It's a good product. They've got instructions for it on how to use it. They offer pretty good pricing. I can't do better than that. If I sold it to you, it'd be the same price.
Right. All right. So we're talking this would go directly on the concrete and then plywood on top of that?
Yep.
Okay. Makes sense. So what is this? So for the moisture test, I was looking that people take like a sheet of plastic or like a little piece of tarp and they tape it onto the floor, let it sit there overnight. If they lift it up and there's moisture under that tarp or the plastic, that means, there's moisture in your concrete. So I would guess.
In that scenario, you may need to add that plastic dimple mat and then put the
Right.
rubber mat on top of that. Like I said, what we always tell people, even in our top projects when we do full designs for folks, that kind of detail has to come from a local builder or engineer, somebody who knows how to construct in that area. That's not something a home theater designer can really take responsibility for. And a homeowner, if you're going to take responsibility like you, Shane, you want to make sure you're being informed by somebody knowledgeable, because I wouldn't want to tell you to put all this stuff in and then you have mold. It's actually a pretty common problem, unfortunately, is that because home theaters don't have windows, you seal them up to make them more sound isolated, you keep the door closed all the time, they tend to grow mold. So we do all sorts of things when we design theaters to prevent that from happening. But one of the things is you got to make sure you're handling moisture correctly in the floor.
Right. Could you do that Lowe's dimpled mat? I think it's called Damp Pro, and then that thin layer of the this stuff here. The
Yeah,
Genie mat?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be okay.
Yeah, I'd rather be safe than sorry. So I guess that would be like the one of the I don't want to say cost effective methods. Is it just like the only way to do it, or is that
No,
like the
no, no.
most
That's
cost
a
effective?
cost-effective method. So if
Okay.
you want to go to type in kinetics rim RIM, and I'll show you a more advanced way to do it. Hush frame has a similar approach, which is what I did, but I don't know if they have pictures on the website of it. So I would just do kinetics rim so you can see it.
How do you spell that? Oh, connects.
Kinetics with a K.
Kinetics. Kinetics noise control. Here we
There
go.
you go. And we want rim.
Add that to the
I
scene.
see it. Yep.
There
There
we
we
go.
go. All
Oh,
right.
I see.
So
Okay.
if you
There we
scroll
go.
down, they should show a picture of what the mat looks like without anything on top of it. I believe. No, they don't. It's here somewhere. We got to just
No,
find it shown.
that's not it.
Well, that's the product. I just wanted to show everybody what it looks like. So the green thing is the rubber mat, and in this case, it's actually a
Right.
rubber coating around a fiberglass piece, and that acts as
Mm-hmm.
the spring. The yellow part is regular fiberglass. It
Fiberglass.
unrolls as a mat. You put the plywood on top. You put your floor on that, and that's your floor. It works great. It provides very good decoupling. It's great for sound isolation, which is what it was really designed for. That's a sprung
Right.
floor, basically. But the side benefit of a sprung floor is you get really good tactile bass. So this is good. There's other ways to do it. It's not the only way.
Interesting. Okay, but you would still probably put that on top of the dimpled mat if there's moisture in your
Maybe
floor.
this particular product, you'd have to check with them. It's not usually good to let fiberglass get wet, so I would guess you'd have to handle the moisture first. I would talk to
Right.
Kinetics about they're going to know how their product handles this. Again, though, I don't know that you've got this issue. If this is an above grade slab, there shouldn't be
Yeah.
moisture coming up through it. Like my floors in my house are concrete. There's nothing covering them. There's no moisture.
Okay. I'll still do that a little test anyways, just to find out. Because
Yeah.
I was looking at finishing my basement, so I was like, oh, maybe I should do that upstairs as well. So I'll give it a shot. But yeah, that looks definitely fancy, and I could see where the fiberglass would keep it from isolating the noise as well.
Yeah, the
I mean,
fiberglass for a couple of purposes. When you put those rubber isolators in there, if you don't put the fiberglass in too, you've created a cavity and you get resonances. So the fiberglass actually helps to damp out the resonances. It does help a little
gotcha.
bit with resilience, but it's actually those rubber blocks that are mostly doing that.
Right. Well, what if you used the little dimple mat, or if I just went with the genie mat, could you put like mass loaded vinyl on top of that and then the subfloor?
You can, and so the primary reason you would do that is that the mass loaded vinyl would add some extra mass to the floor. So
Yeah.
here's the issue. In your particular case, the reason why you wouldn't do that is there's nothing below that. It's a concrete slab, right?
Yeah.
And there's no buildings, rooms, anything below that, just earth,
Nope.
right?
Just
So there's
earth.
nowhere for the sound to go. It's just going to go into the earth. It can't go anywhere else. Sound can transmit through concrete slabs to other areas potentially, but if you've got a basement, I'm assuming the rest of your house is a wood floor, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So that concrete ends basically where the foundation starts for the rest of the house.
Yeah.
As you said, it probably was a garage that got
Garage.
converted. And so there's no reason to use the mass loaded vinyl because there's nothing you need the mass for.
Got you. All right. All right. So that's the flooring. Would you build the riser on the concrete, or would you build it on top of the floor?
I would build
subfloor.
it on top of the flooring. So what you're doing that way is you're helping to make sure the riser can shake along with the rest of the floor. That way your subwoofers are sitting on top of the floor, which is now suspended off of the concrete, and your extra seats from the riser are sitting on the same thing. The subwoofer is sort of directly coupled that way to the thing that shakes, which is everywhere you are. It's no longer
Right.
directly coupled to the concrete. And if you were to put the riser on the concrete, it would decouple it from the subwoofers. So if you want to have that tactile effect, it's good to have everything sitting on the same floating floor. It also makes life a little easier.
Come on, Matt. I thought you were going to save me money here. Now I got to do the whole floor. I thought I was going to do half of the floor.
If you want to do that, we've done that before where we have to. It's not the best way to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
What you could do is what you're saying, and then you would but you're going to have to then decouple. You don't want to secure the riser to the concrete. Then you're going to have to decouple the riser. So
Okay. All right.
this way you
all
can
right.
just build it right onto the plywood.
All right. I guess I can't cheap out here. All right. So for risers, you were talking about using it as a base trap. I don't know how many people do this, but is this a common practice?
I think it is. The issue with this, I'll just say, I designed them, and I don't even know that I believe in them. I don't know how well they work. It's really hard, if not impossible, to build a room and build a riser and then remove the riser and put a new one in that has a base trap built into it, or to modify one to have the base trap, and to test both ways and be sure of whatever differences you find is being caused by the riser. So I've never done that. Anthony Gramani's never done that. Everybody I've talked to is basically never done that. What Anthony had said when he and I talked about it was, he's built like 1,000+ rooms. It seems like rooms with base trap risers perform better than rooms without on average. And
Really?
I have not built 1,000 rooms. I've maybe built 100 rooms. And so I just don't have the data, I guess. Plus these base trap risers are pretty common. So, I did one for Gene. I've done them for clients when they ask for them. I don't make a big deal about them because, as I said, I kind of question how effective they are. There's different ways to do it. One of the ways I often do it puts the actual damping opening, if you will, near the boundaries. And there's a good theoretical reason for why that's better. The boundaries are where the pressure is highest and velocity is lowest. And the design approach that we typically use, they're basically pressure absorbers. So having the opening, the mouth opening of it near there for these Helmholtz devices makes more sense. The other option, which is what Anthony likes to do, is you just drill a lot of holes. Or
Yeah.
if you don't want to drill a lot of holes, you can actually have the plywood machined for you ahead of time with the hole pattern in it, and you can tune that to a particular frequency. It's still a Helmholtz device, but it's covering the whole surface area. As long as everything's braced properly, it doesn't necessarily compromise the structural rigidity or anything, and that can be effective too.
Is there a sorry? So on the front, where your seats would be sitting up against, are we talking across the full frontal surface of the riser?
So no, it's actually the back of the riser where you should do it.
Oh,
That was so Oralex did a design like that where they had these pipes. I think there was PVC pipes and they had them come out the front. I don't think that's a very good design. I think that the pipes should have been coming out the back of it, up against the wall. And that assumes the
gotcha.
riser's up against a wall. If the riser's not up against a wall, I don't know. It's quite debatable whether this is a good idea at all.
All right, so you're saying at least drill a few holes in the back of the riser because it's going to be sitting flush right up against the back wall.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
think it could be worth it. Yeah.
just a couple
And I
holes.
can give you a design later that you can show
Yeah,
people for what that would be. It's a certain, like for holes, it would just be a certain size hole and a certain quantity of them, and you can concentrate them in a particular area. You build a riser the way you build a floor or a
yeah.
wall. So you could take like 2x12s if you wanted to, for instance. You would use those as uprights. You put the plywood on top and you put acoustic insulation in the bays that you create between those. They're often spaced about 16 inches apart.
Are we talking rock wool or just standard pink stuff?
It really doesn't matter. So rock
No.
wool, pink stuff, any kind of fuzz basically is fine. There was some studies that were done looking at that years ago to see if it made a difference, and the answer was it doesn't. So what I tell people is use whatever you're comfortable with. There's some people don't like fiberglass. It's got some nasty stuff in it. It makes your skin itchy. I don't really like working with it. Some
Yeah.
people don't like rock wool. It's got some nasty stuff in it too. It doesn't make you itchy, but and then there's other materials like cotton insulation. It's actually got some nasty stuff in it too because they got to make it fire resistant. There's polyfill you could use. I don't know how you'd have to make sure it's rated to be used inside a wall. There's lots. Any fuzz is fine. I don't make a big deal about that.
Is there a recommended height that you see most people using, or
Yeah, 12 to
can you just go?
14 inches is probably the most common height that we use. And the reason for that is in most typical rooms, and I should do a layout for you so we can actually bring this up. Maybe next time we can do that. Actually, I can share my screen, right?
Yeah.
All right. I have another client's system open right now, and it's got, I think, a diagram of the riser. Yeah, we can do this. All right, let me share my screen.
Thank you, Haterade Cowboy, for the super chat. All right, here we go. Add to scene.
All right, this is my client, Omar. So, Omar, I'm sorry for letting your privacy out, but I think we've talked about this before.
Yep.
So this is his riser for his system. That screen right there, this is a pretty typical height. So if we look at it this way, you can see we've got 60-degree viewing angle. it's listed in this particular one. I'm revising his plan right now, but this one shows it 140 inches wide. It's a 2.39 to 1 screen. And what we did was a 14-inch riser, and you can see the issue. So with the screen at this particular height, which is, you can see this little dotted line here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, can you see my cursor, or is it not showing that?
No, I can't see it. I can see the dotted line though. Well, which dotted line?
So
On the top of the diagram or the bottom?
dotted line in the top diagram there. Let me go up a little bit more. It goes from the middle of the screen to the kind of middle of the head. That's the angle up that your head has. So that's part of the, we call that ergonomic design.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful. You want that line to either be flat or up maybe 5 or 10 degrees. We consider 15 degrees to be an absolute limit, and that is like probably going to be a crook neck. But if we have to do it for some reason, like there's 5 or 6 rows and the front row is just a bit too close, we would go for it. So that's one of the reasons why you don't see the screen being even higher up in this particular case, is because I'm trying to keep that dotted line angle to a minimum. Mm-hmm. So this is 14 inches, and you can see that the back row there, that yellow cone just hits the top of the guy's head in this particular scenario. And it's showing what a typical 6 foot tall person would be like. Yep. To the bottom of the screen. What that means is the head should not be blocking the bottom of the screen in this scenario. That the person in that back row should be able to see everything. Now, right. I probably would move the screen up a few inches just to give myself a little bit more margin, but I wouldn't push the screen to the top because, again, I want to make sure that I'm keeping those lines in this ergonomic design as flat as possible. So goal probably would be make it so that the back row is flat, front row is looking up a little bit, but not too much. So that's where the 14 inches comes from. If you dropped it 2 inches to go at 12 inches, the problem you're going to run into is it is going to have some blocking. The nice thing about 12 inches is you can use 2x12s with a layer of plywood, and that gives you roughly a 12-inch riser. So that's one of the reasons why we say 12. And it's, if there's a little bit of blocking, it's not the end of the world. Going more than 14 inches runs into some issues with steps. In most places, you have to have legally correct steps. And once you get more than 14 inches, you run into a problem of needing to have either 2 overly large steps, which are more than 7 inches up each, or you'd have to have 3 kind of oddball, 3-inch up steps kind of a thing.
Right.
Not 3 inches. What am I saying? It would be 4 or 5 inches up, I guess.
What do you mean legal steps? Like steps have to be a certain height?
Yeah, there's legal requirements for how many steps, what the maximum height of a step up can be.
Oh, interesting.
And so I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. I think it's 7 inches. 7 or 8 inches is the max you can do. So if you take a 14-inch riser and you split the height, that's a 7-inch step. That means your step up to the first step is 7 inches. Your step from the first step up to the riser itself is another 7 inches. If you made this like a 15-inch riser, the problem you're going to have is that you're going to have a 7-inch step, and then you're going to have an 8-inch step, and you're not allowed to do that. Assuming I'm remembering these details right. So somebody who's a builder may have that right in the top of their head. But this is, again, when we're doing these are the things we think about. We usually check local building codes to make sure we're in accordance with that. I understand you're doing it yourself and nobody's going to come check. And so you want to try to design it legally, because here's the other problem. What if you just decide to sell the house? You could be in a problem where somebody inspects it and says, well, there's this stage, because they're not going to know what it is. So this inspector is going to come in and say, there's a stage with an illegal step. And what they're going to make you do is actually tear it out to sell the house.
Wow, really? Well, my idea, I've always done, this is what I've always done in the past 2 home theaters that I've had. Instead of steps, I built ramps. So it would just be a gradual slope upwards to the second row.
You probably can do that. I mean, then you're wheelchair accessible too, I suppose.
Yeah, I would always put like a handicap bar there too as well. Because when you go to the theater, they use ramps. I mean, a lot of them have, some of them have ramps, yeah. So I always thought that was a cool idea rather than going steps.
Yeah, you can do that, I believe. I don't think there's anything that says you can't.
Odds of you tripping? Pretty slim.
I don't usually put ramps in, but you're perfectly welcome to do that. We have done that. I shouldn't say that. We have done ramps for folks who have need handicap accessibility.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely going to have at least 1 ramp in there. So I like having ramps because I think it's pretty cool.
You want to be ready for when you're in retirement age?
Exactly. What other details should we consider for riser building?
Well, the other part of it,
Anything like that?
Yeah, so I'll just mention for the flooring in general and for the top of the riser, I like to use a product called Advantech. Advantech is available in Home Depot, Lowe's, all the different places. It's very common. It's a kind of basically fancy oriented strand board. The reason why we like it is that plywood, when it gets wet, swells. And even though they make like marine grade or more water resistant plywoods, it still can be problematic, and it's not as perfectly flat, and it can buckle basically when it starts to get wet. This particular OSB product can actually have water sitting on top of it, and then once it
Mm-hmm.
dries out again, will stay stable. The other thing is, because it's oriented strand board, plywood basically has the wood plies going opposite directions from each other, but there's only two directions. Oriented strand board is strands of wood that are going in random directions. So when the wood starts to shrink and expand, it averages out, basically keeping the panel straight. So we were always using very expensive finished grade plywood, like you would use to make furniture, for
Yeah.
flooring, because it was so smooth and flat. But it was like $150 a sheet at one point about a year or two ago. I think it's come
Wow.
down a bit, but it's still over $100 a sheet. And it
Is
wasn't as good as this. And one of the builders I worked with actually told me about it, and he goes, "You should look at that." And we looked at it, and what we realized is it's got lots of advantages for home theater. So one is it's actually denser than plywood. It's a lot denser than plywood.
this
And
stuff?
having this stuff, and that's
Okay.
nice. I mean, because basically that's a lot of glue. They've taken
Yeah.
wood, they've taken a whole bunch of glue, they've pressed it together, they've vacuumed all the air out of it, and they've made this board that is probably as much glue as it is wood. That's probably not true, but there's a lot of glue in there.
Yeah.
So that glue ends up giving it a lot of density, whereas plywood has only glue between the plies, so it doesn't have as much glue relative to the wood. So it's
Right.
denser than plywood, it's smoother and flatter than plywood, and it's less likely to basically change shape and dimensions than plywood would. So we've largely switched over to using this Advantech oriented strand board. And what I would recommend is, this is at a bare minimum, use the 23 by 32. You can get it in an even thicker size. If you can get it, use it, because then
Gotcha.
it's even heavier. When you're building the riser, my recommendation is, you can build the actual riser sub platform piece of it, the structure, however you want. I've seen people try to get fancy and make it so all the cells, if you will, underneath the wood like interconnect with each other so that the airflow. It doesn't really matter if you want to do that, but if you have like some reason for wanting to do that, go for it. We typically do runners like 2x12s or something like that, and we then put the plywood or the OSB product on top of it. You got to fill the bays in between with insulation. It doesn't have to be fancy insulation. It doesn't need to be 100% tightly filled, but you do want to fill, I'd say, at least 50 or 60% of them. 50%, 50 to 60% of the area, I should say, the volume, with insulation. And then when you put that OSB on top, I do recommend using subfloor adhesive, because even though you're going to screw into it,
Yeah.
you got a lot of vibrational energy in this room, and you want to minimize any chance of vibrations. It's the other reason for using a heavier material like the thicker stuff. You can do
Gotcha.
2 layers. I did 2 layers on mine. It's not a bad idea. It makes it heavier. Yeah, you can use green glue. I've seen people also use these like roofing materials, which are really heavy and massive and very well damped.
Mhm.
Only reason I don't like that is that stuff outgasses. I gotta imagine the outgassing is toxic, and it's inside in an area that doesn't have the amount of ventilation that your roof does. So I don't personally recommend using that stuff. I don't know that that's safe. If you want to add mass and damping to it, what you could do is a layer of the Advantech, a layer of mass loaded vinyl, and another layer of Advantech. That would provide fairly similar results, and at least mass loaded vinyl is designed to be inside your house.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think you've answered most of the questions for, just retrofitting your floor and then a riser. So, Matt, thanks, man. And we're coming up exactly like 30 minutes. Next week, we will tackle something. We'll think of something for next. We'll think of
You had
something
a
for next
big
week.
swallow before you said that, like it's going to be something scary. We'll tackle something.
Tackle something. Maybe some speaker placement or something like that. I've got John coming on from Trinov. I think in the next 2 weeks. So he's got this whole floor plan of how many speakers he thinks I should have, stuff like that for Oro and DTSX and all that stuff. But maybe we could talk about like mounting, like speaker mounting, stuff like that, speaker concealing and stuff like that.
Sure.
But guys, thanks for hanging out with us today. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. We'll try to address them next week. So we'll try to do that, every week. I wanted to answer a couple of questions today, but we're coming at 30 minutes, and I don't want these to go too long, or else people will click off. So make sure I left Matt's contact down below in this video's description if you want to use him for your own home theater build. Have questions for him. You can do that. Matt does charge. But if you had questions here live, you should have asked them now. So stop by his YouTube channel, Poes Acoustics, email him, all that good stuff. Matt, any final words? Where else can they find you?
Yeah, my website, my YouTube channel. They can email me at matt@poesacoustics.com. My wife's been doing all my social media. She's actually sitting next to me right now. So if you see any of that stuff and it doesn't look like something I said, it's probably because it's something she said for me. But I appreciate all the work she puts in, and you're welcome to reach out to me there, and she'll pass it on to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us this afternoon. Tune in next Thursday at 3 o'clock for the next chapter of Home Theater Builder.